My father didn't raise his voice when he disinherited me. He did it with a toast over roasted duck, smiling as he handed my brother the entire estate. I swallowed the humiliation, thinking that was the worst of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, our silent partner vanished, taking $5,100,000 of liquidity with him, and suddenly the family that tried to write me out of the future needed me to save them from the past. The invitation to dinner felt less like a gesture of affection and more like a subpoena. I drove my sedan past the city limits of Briar Glen, the town where I had spent the first 18 years of my life learning how to be invisible. It was late October, and the New England foliage had turned the color of bruised plums and rusted iron. The lake that gave the city its name was a flat, gray sheet of glass to my left, reflecting the darkening sky. I had built a good life 2 towns over. I had my own apartment, a job in contract law that paid the bills, and a circle of friends who knew me as Audrey, the reliable one, not Audrey, the disappointment. But when Graham Carter called, I answered. I always answered. The dinner was held at the Alder House Club. It was the kind of place that smelled of mahogany polish, stale cigar smoke, and old money that had stopped growing generations ago. My father had rented the private dining room, the one with the hunting prints on the walls and the velvet curtains drawn tight against the drafty windows. When I walked in, the staging was immediate. My brother, Ethan, was already seated at the right hand of our father. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my car. His hair swept back in that careless, charming way that made bank tellers and bartenders alike lean in a little closer. Beside my father sat my stepmother, Lila. She looked brittle, her fingers twisting the linen napkin in her lap as if she were trying to wring water from a stone. "You made it," Ethan said, standing up to offer me a cheek to kiss. "We thought you might be too busy." "I am never too busy for family," I said, the lie tasting like copper in my mouth. I took my seat across from them. The distance across the table felt vast, like an oceanic trench separating 2 different species. Dinner was a quiet affair of roasted duck and heavy red wine. My father, Graham Carter, looked older than I remembered. His skin was papery, translucent enough to show the map of blue veins beneath, and his hands shook slightly when he lifted his glass. He had been the titan of Carter and Vale Industrial Supply for 40 years, a man who could stare down union reps and suppliers with a single arched brow. Now, he looked like a man holding his breath. "Audrey," my father said. His voice was gravelly. "I am glad you came." I smiled, waiting. We did not do small talk in the Carter family. We did transactions. "I have asked you here because I have made a decision regarding the estate," he said. He did not look at me. He looked at the centerpiece, a depressing arrangement of dried thistles. I am 72. The business needs certainty. The family needs certainty. I put my fork down. The silence in the room was sudden and absolute. "I have decided to consolidate the estate." Graham continued. "Carter and Vale, the properties, the trust. It will all go to Ethan." The words hung in the air, heavy and physical. I felt a flush of heat climb up my neck, not from anger, but from a profound, suffocating humiliation. It was not just the money, it was the public erasure. "Ethan deserves the entire estate," my father said, his voice gaining a rehearsed rhythm. "He is the one who stayed loyal. He is the one who comes into the office every day. You left. Audrey, you built a life elsewhere. It is only fair." I looked at Ethan. He was studying his wine glass, a small, sad smile playing on his lips, as if he were the victim of this generosity. But then I saw it. Beside his plate, tucked neatly under the edge of the table, were 2 thick, printed folders, legal size, blue backing. He knew. He had brought the paperwork. I looked at Lila. She was staring straight ahead, her eyes glassy. "This will keep us safe," she whispered. "Excuse me," I asked. Lila blinked, startling as if I had shouted, "It is for the best." "Audrey, it keeps the family safe." I turned to my father. "I live 20 minutes away," I said, keeping my voice level. I manage the compliance audits for the company remotely. I visit every Sunday. How is that leaving? Graham finally looked at me. His eyes were watery and terrified. It is done. Audrey. The rest of the meal was a blur of clinking silverware and suffocating polite conversation. Ethan spoke about expansion plans, about new distribution channels, using buzzwords that meant nothing. I watched him. I watched the way he poured more wine for our father whenever the glass was half empty. I watched the way he touched the folders, a possessive tap of the finger. When the check came, I stood up. I need some air. I said. I walked out to the parking lot, the cold October air biting at my exposed skin. The Alderhouse Club stood on a hill, and below, the lights of the Carter and Vale warehouse flickered in the distance. That building was the spine of our family. It was where I had learned to count inventory when I was 6. It was where I had spent my summers filing invoices while Ethan went to sailing camp. The heavy oak door of the club opened behind me. I expected Ethan, coming to deliver a velvet-wrapped gloat. Instead, it was my father. He walked with a cane now, a heavy thing with a silver head. He stopped a few feet away from me, leaning heavily on it. "You are angry," he said. "I am not angry." I said, "I am clear. You have made your choice." He stepped closer. The smell of scotch and old wool clung to him. He looked around the empty parking lot, checking the shadows, checking the windows of the club. The paranoia in his posture was new. Graham Carter had never been afraid of the dark. "I cannot fix what I promised," he said, his voice a ragged whisper. "What does that mean?" I asked. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. He reached for my hand, prying my fingers open and pressing the cold metal into my palm. I looked down. It was a brass key, tarnished with age, the kind that belonged to a safety deposit box from the middle of the last century. "If things go wrong," he whispered, "use this." "If what goes wrong?" I asked. "You just gave Ethan the kingdom. What could go wrong?" He gripped my hand tight, his fingers surprisingly strong. "Just take it, Audrey, and do not tell your brother. Do not tell Lila." Why, I asked. "Because I am a coward," he said. He turned and walked back toward the warmth of the club, leaving me standing in the cold with a brass key burning a hole in my hand. The next morning, the Carter and Vale offices were vibrating with a tension that had nothing to do with the machinery on the warehouse floor. I arrived at 9. Technically, I was a contractor, a consultant who handled the dry, boring work of regulatory compliance that Ethan found too tedious to read. I walked through the main bullpen, noticing the hushed conversations that stopped the moment I passed. They knew. In a town like Briar Glen, news traveled faster than light. The king had chosen his prince, and the princess had been exiled. I made my way to the finance office, intending to finish the quarterly audit I had started the week before. I needed the distraction. I needed to bury my brain in spreadsheets and tax codes. As I approached the controller's office, the door flew open. Arthur Penhaligon, who had managed the company's books since I was in diapers, stumbled out. Arthur was a man of routine. He wore the same gray cardigan every day. He ate a tuna sandwich at 12:15. He never raised his voice. Now, he was gasping for air, his face the color of wet ash. He clutched a file to his chest as if it were a shield. "I cannot do it," he wheezed. "I cannot move the numbers like that. It is not possible." "Arthur," I asked, stepping forward. He looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. "I am done. Audrey, I am resigning, effective immediately. I cannot go to jail for this family." He shoved past me, running toward the exit. The office went silent. Phones stopped ringing. Heads popped up from cubicles. 10 minutes later, the glass doors of the executive suite opened. Ethan walked out, looking annoyed but composed. Beside him walked a woman I did not recognize. She was tall, with hair cut in a sharp, dark bob and a suit that looked like it could cut glass. "Everyone, back to work," Ethan announced, clapping his hands once. "Arthur has decided to take an early retirement due to health issues. We wish him well." He gestured to the woman beside him. "This is Mara Vance. She will be stepping in as interim CFO to help us through the transition. Mara Vance didn't smile. She scanned the room with eyes that looked like they were calculating the liquidation value of the furniture. Her gaze landed on me. "You are Audrey," she said. I said, "My office." She said, "Now." I followed her into Arthur's old office. It still smelled of his peppermint tea. Mara closed the blinds and sat behind the desk. Not bothering to adjust the chair, she placed a single sheet of paper on the desk and spun it around to face me. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. I looked at the document. It was a bank notification from Pinecrest National. It was stamped with urgent red ink. I read the text. It was a notice of a material adverse relationship. I looked up. "What happened?" "Our silent partner," Mara said, her voice devoid of emotion. "The liquidity provider that Carter and Vale has relied on for 20 years. He pulled out this morning." I frowned. I didn't know we had a silent partner. I thought the operating capital came from the trust. Ethan thought so too. "Apparently," Mara said, "but he was wrong. There is an investor, or there was, at 8 this morning. The investor invoked a withdrawal clause." "How much?" I asked. $5,100,000, she said. The number hit me like a physical blow. 5 million. That was not just profit. That was operating capital. That was payroll. That was the money we used to buy inventory before the customers paid us. "We don't have that in cash." I said, "No," Mara said, "we do not. And because the withdrawal triggers a ratio breach with Pinecrest National, the bank has frozen the credit lines. We have 30 days to replace the capital, or the bank calls the loan and seizes the assets." I stared at her. "Does Ethan know Ethan is currently ordering a new ergonomic chair for the CEO suite?" Mara said dryly. "He told me to handle it. He said it was just a paperwork glitch." I stood up. "I need to see the contract." "You can't," Mara said. "Why not?" "Because there isn't one in the files," she said. "Arthur didn't have it. Ethan doesn't have it. The only record we have is the wire transfer history and a monthly dividend payment to an entity called Rowe Holdings." I felt a cold prickle at the base of my spine. Rowe. I had never heard the name. I left Mara's office and marched straight to the executive suite. Ethan was sitting behind our father's massive oak desk, spinning a fountain pen between his fingers. He looked like a child playing dress-up. "Ethan," I said, "we have a problem. Don't start." "Audrey," he said, not looking up. "I know you are upset about last night, but don't bring drama into the office. I am trying to work. We just lost $5 million of liquidity." I said, "The bank is freezing the lines." Ethan waved his hand dismissively. "Mara is handling it. It's a negotiation tactic. The partner is just rattling the cage because Dad stepped down. I will take them out to lunch, charm them a bit, and we will be back to business as usual." "You don't even know who they are." I said, "There is no contract." "Ethan." He finally looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "Why are you here?" "Audrey. You are a compliance consultant. This is CEO business. Go check the safety manuals or something." He didn't get it. He truly didn't get it. He thought the title conferred the competence. He thought the world worked on handshakes and family names because that was the only world he had ever known. I walked out of his office, my heart hammering against my ribs. The company was bleeding out, and the captain was busy admiring his hat. I got into my car and drove. I didn't go home. I drove to Harbor Light Savings, the bank where my father had banked since the 70s. It was a stone building downtown, built like a fortress. I walked to the front desk. "I need to access a safety deposit box," I said. The teller, a woman named Sarah, who I had gone to high school with, smiled. "Of course. Audrey, do you have the key?" I opened my hand. The brass key was warm from my grip. "Box 402, Sarah said. "I will take you down." The vault was cool and smelled of dust and silence. Sarah unlocked her side, and I slid my key into the second lock. It turned with a heavy, satisfying click. She slid the long metal box out and carried it to a private viewing room. "I'll give you a moment," she said, closing the door. I sat at the small wooden table and stared at the metal box. My father's voice echoed in my head. If things go wrong, things had gone wrong faster than he could have imagined. I lifted the lid. Inside, there was no cash. There were no diamonds. There was a thin stack of papers and a small, velvet pouch. I opened the pouch first. It contained a gold locket, old and scratched. I pried it open. Inside was a tiny black and white photo of my father, young and handsome, laughing on a sailboat. His arm was around a woman. It wasn't my mother, and it wasn't Lila. The woman was dark-haired, striking, with eyes that looked fiercely intelligent even in the grainy photo. She was looking at the camera with a defiance that unsettled me. I set the locket down and picked up the papers. The top document was a partnership memorandum. Dated 30 years ago, it was typed on a typewriter. Parties Graham Carter and Arden Rowe. Subject capital contribution and silent interest. I scanned the terms. It was standard legalese until I got to the final clause. The silent partner, Rowe, maintains the right to withdraw full principal and accumulated interest immediately upon any transfer of majority control of Carter and Vale Industrial Supply, unless said transfer is approved in writing by Rowe. Furthermore, this agreement is binding on the honor of Graham Carter regarding the matter of August 1989. August 1989. I was 3 years old. Ethan was 6. Underneath the memorandum was a sealed envelope. On the front, in my father's shaky handwriting, were the words, "For Audrey if I lose my nerve." I hesitated. This was the line. Once I opened this, I could not go back to being the dutiful daughter. I could not go back to the illusion of a normal family. I tore the envelope open. The letter was handwritten on Carter and Vale letterhead. Audrey, if you are reading this, I have done something terrible. I have given everything to Ethan. You have to understand. I did not do it because I love him more. I did it because I'm afraid of him. And because I'm ashamed of what I did to get us here. The money, the $5 million, it wasn't an investment. It was penance. Arden Rowe is not just a banker. She was the one who built this company with me. She was the one who designed the logistics model that made us rich. And when she got in trouble, personal trouble, the kind that ruins a woman's reputation in a town like this, I didn't help her. I used it. I forced her out and kept her capital. I told her I was protecting the company. She let me keep the money on one condition, that I run the company with integrity. She told me that if I ever turned into the kind of man who puts image over truth, she would burn it down. Ethan is not the man she wants to see in charge. But Ethan knows about August 1989. He found out years ago. He's been holding it over me. Audrey, he told me that if I didn't give him the estate, he would expose the secret. He would destroy my legacy. Giving him the company was the cheapest way to keep the peace. But now I have unleashed him, and Arden will not stand for it. She will pull the money. She will destroy the business to punish me. I am sorry I was not strong enough to fight him. I am sorry I sacrificed you to save myself. You are the only one who can fix this. You are the only one who reads the fine print. Dad. I lowered the letter. The silence in the viewing room felt heavy, pressing against my eardrums. My entire life, I had thought I was the one who lacked something. I thought I wasn't charismatic enough, wasn't bold enough, wasn't Carter enough, but it wasn't that. I was just the collateral damage in a blackmail scheme between a coward and a manipulator. Ethan didn't win because he was better. He won because he had weaponized our father's guilt. He had threatened to burn the house down. So Dad handed him the keys, and now, because of that, 500 employees were about to lose their livelihoods. The town of Briar Glen was about to lose its economic anchor. I looked at the photo of the woman Arden Rowe. She had been betrayed, erased, and used, and now she was coming for her money. I folded the letter and put it in my purse. I put the locket in my pocket. I could walk away. I could go back to my apartment 2 towns over, keep my head down, and watch the Carter empire crumble from a safe distance. It would be poetic justice. Ethan would be king of a pile of ashes. But then I thought about Arthur Penhaligon, shaking in the hallway. I thought about the guys on the warehouse floor who had worked there for 20 years. I thought about the fact that if the company went under, the pension fund would likely dissolve with it. Ethan would be fine. He would take a golden parachute and blame the economy. It was the rest of them who would suffer. I stood up. I wasn't going to beg my father for love anymore. I wasn't going to beg Ethan for scraps. I had the truth now, and in a family built on lies, the truth was a weapon. I walked out of the viewing room. "Are you finished?" Sarah asked. "I'm just getting started," I said. I drove back to the office. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the parking lot. I walked past the reception desk, past the whispers, and straight into the conference room where Mara Vance was setting up a war room. She looked up as I entered. She looked exhausted. "We are projecting a payroll failure in 3 weeks," she said, "unless we get a bridge loan, which we won't get with the lawsuit pending." I pulled a chair out and sat down. "We are not getting a bridge loan," I said, "and we are not going to charm the investor." Mara put her pen down. "Then what are we going to do?" I placed the brass key on the table. "We are going to find Arden Rowe," I said, "and we are going to find out exactly what she wants." "Who is Arden Rowe?" Mara asked. "The woman who really owns this company," I said, "and I am the only one she might listen to." The door to the conference room opened. Ethan stood there, looking flushed and irritated. "Audrey," he said, "I thought I told you to go home. We are handling this." I looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time, I didn't see the golden child. I saw a small, scared man standing on a trap door he had just unlatched. "I am not going home. Ethan," I said, "I am consulting, and since I am the only one who knows why the money disappeared, you might want to sit down and listen." Ethan's eyes darted to Mara, then back to me. He forced a laugh. "You are bluffing. Try me," I said. He hesitated. The mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the panic underneath. He didn't sit, but he didn't leave, either. I turned back to Mara. "Pull the vendor list from 1989. I said, "Look for any shell companies with the initials AR. We start there." "Audrey," Ethan started, his voice a warning growl. I didn't look at him. "We have 30 days. I told Mara. "Let's get to work." I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was the absence of fear. My father had given me the key to save myself. But he was wrong. I wasn't going to use it to escape. I was going to use it to take over. The warehouse office was a glass box suspended above the concrete floor, vibrating slightly with the hum of the forklifts below. It smelled of diesel, cardboard, and stale coffee, the scent of real work, far removed from the mahogany and velvet of the Alder House Club. Mara Vance had turned the conference table into a triage unit. Stacks of invoices were piled like barricades. She didn't look up when I walked in. She was typing furiously on her laptop, a phone pressed between her ear and shoulder. "I am telling you, the liquidity is temporary," she said into the phone. Her voice was calm, but her knuckles were white. "No, do not cut the shipment. If you cut the shipment, we breach the contract with Regional. Give me 48 hours. She hung up and finally looked at me. "That was our primary steel vendor. They heard rumors. They are shortening our payment terms from 60 days to 10. 10 days, I asked, dropping my bag on a chair. "We cannot turn inventory that fast. We cannot do anything that fast," Mara said. She spun her laptop around to face me. "Look at this." I leaned in. It was a cash flow projection, a series of bars dipping dangerously below the red line. The withdrawal of the $5,100,000 did not just empty the reserve. Mara explained, "It triggered a covenant in our lending agreement with Pinecrest National. It is called a Material Adverse Relationship Clause. Basically, the bank lent us money based on the assurance that this silent partner was backing us. Now that the partner is gone, the bank considers us a high-risk borrower." "What does that mean in English?" I asked. "It means they have frozen the revolving credit line," she said. "We have payroll for the warehouse staff due in 2 weeks. If that line isn't thawed, checks bounce. If checks bounce, the union walks. If the union walks, Carter and Vale is dead by Thanksgiving." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. This wasn't just numbers on a screen. This was Mike in shipping who had 3 kids. This was Sarah in accounting who was saving for a wedding. "We need to replace the capital." I said, "We can't," Mara said. No traditional lender will touch us while we are in technical default. We need the silent partner to come back. Or we need to find a private equity shark who will eat the company alive to save it. I sat down, rubbing my temples. I need to see the original agreement. Mara, the one between my father and this Roe entity. The letter I found in the safety deposit box is compelling, but it is not a contract. I need to see the withdrawal terms. There has to be a cure period. Ethan has the files, Mara said. He moved all the governance documents to the executive suite this morning. He said he is centralizing operations. Of course he is, I muttered. I left the warehouse and walked across the parking lot to the main administration building. The air was crisp, biting with the promise of winter. I walked straight to the executive wing. Ethan was in our father's office, standing by the window, looking out at the delivery trucks. He turned as I entered, a smile plastered on his face that didn't reach his eyes. Audrey, he said, I hear you are bothering the staff with doom and gloom. I am trying to stop the staff from being unemployed. Ethan, I said, I need the partnership agreement for Roe Holdings. Ethan chuckled. A low, dismissive sound. You don't need anything. Audrey, you are a consultant. I am the acting CEO. You are not the CEO yet. I said, Dad is still chairman. Dad is tired. Ethan said, his voice dropping an octave. He trusts me to handle the transition. And as for the agreement, that is privileged corporate information. You do not have clearance. I stared at him. Clearance. This is a family business, not the Pentagon. We are about to miss payroll. I have it under control, he said, turning back to the window. I am meeting with Pinecrest later. I will smooth it over. Now, if you don't mind, I have real work to do. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him until the veneer of arrogance cracked and the scared little boy fell out. But I knew that would only make him dig in deeper. I walked out of his office, my hands shaking. If he wouldn't give me the document, I would get it from the source. I went to my temporary desk in the compliance corner and dialed the number for Hollis and Brine LLP. They had been the company's outside counsel for 30 years. Old man Hollis played golf with my father every Sunday. Carter and Vale matters. A receptionist answered. This is Audrey Carter. I said, I need to speak with Mr. Hollis. It is urgent. One moment. Ms. Carter. The hold music was a soft, classical piece I recognized from my childhood. It played for a long time. Finally, a voice came on the line. It wasn't Mr. Hollis. It was a junior associate I didn't know. Mrs. Carter. This is Greg. Mr. Hollis is unavailable. Greg, I need a copy of the partnership agreement with Roe Holdings sent to my secure email immediately. We are conducting a compliance audit regarding the recent capital withdrawal. There was a pause, a long, uncomfortable silence. I am afraid I cannot do that. Ms. Carter, excuse me. We have received instructions regarding client privilege, Greg said, his voice tight. Mr. Ethan Carter has retained the firm for matters regarding family governance and estate restructuring. As such, all document requests must be routed through him directly. My jaw dropped. Ethan had conflicted them out. He had hired the company lawyers to represent him personally, effectively blocking me from accessing company records. Greg, I said, keeping my voice steady, I am a shareholder. I am a member of the family. I understand. The associate said, but our instructions are clear. You will have to ask your brother. He hung up. I sat there, holding the dead receiver. He was walling me off. He was systematically cutting the lines of communication so that he could control the narrative. He didn't care if the ship sank, as long as he was the only one standing on the bridge. My cell phone buzzed on the desk. I looked at the screen. It was a number I didn't recognize, with a local area code. I picked it up. This is Audrey. Ms. Carter, a voice said. It was male, calm, and courteous. Not a sales voice, a lawyer voice. Who is this? My name is Noah Klein, the man said. I am an attorney. I represent the party you know as the silent partner. I froze. I sat up straighter, looking around to make sure no one was listening. I am listening. Mr. Klein, I understand you are looking for clarity regarding the withdrawal. He said, My client prefers not to litigate this in the press or through the rumor mill. However, there are things you should know that your brother is likely not sharing. What things, I asked. Not on the phone, he said. Can you meet me? Where there is a coffee shop in Maple Key? About 20 minutes north of you. The Roasted Bean. Meet me there in an hour. Come alone. Why should I trust you, I asked. Because, Ms. Carter, he said softly, your name is in the original deal. You are the only reason my client waited this long to pull the trigger. He hung up. Maple Key was a tourist town that went to sleep after Labor Day. The streets were lined with empty saltwater taffy shops and boutiques with closed for the season signs in the windows. The Roasted Bean was the only thing open, a small shop with fogged windows and the smell of cinnamon. Noah Klein was sitting at a back table. He looked nothing like the sharks at Hollis and Brine. He was younger, maybe 40, wearing a corduroy jacket and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like an English professor. He stood when I approached. Audrey Carter, he said. Thank you for coming. I sat down, keeping my coat on. You said my name was in the deal. Explain. Noah sat and folded his hands on the table. He didn't have a briefcase. He didn't have a stack of files. My client is Arden Rowe, he said. I nodded. I saw the name on the memorandum. Who is she? She is a private investor, Noah said. But before that, she was a logistics expert. She helped your father design the supply chain model that Carter and Vail uses today. They were partners, in every sense of the word, until about 30 years ago. The letter my father wrote mentioned a betrayal. I said, a personal wrongdoing. Noah nodded slowly. It was a different time. Ms. Carter, your father made a choice to protect his social standing rather than defend his partner. He pushed Arden out. He kept her capital, her ideas, and her equity. And in exchange, he offered her a silent interest, a payout that would keep her quiet. And she took it. She took it because she had no choice. Noah said, but she added a rider, a moral clause. The capital would remain only as long as the company was run with competence and integrity, and specifically, that Graham Carter would not transfer sole control to any heir without an independent review of that heir's capability. And the announcement at the dinner triggered the clause. Noah finished. Graham announced that Ethan deserves the entire estate, that he is the sole successor. That announcement violated the spirit and the letter of the agreement. So she pulled the money to punish him, I asked. No, Noah said. She pulled the money because she does not trust your brother. She has watched from a distance. She knows about the turnover in the executive suite. She knows about the silenced complaints. She believes that handing Ethan the company is a death sentence for the business she helped build. I leaned back. The withdrawal isn't about returns. I said, realizing the scope of it, it's about a broken promise. Exactly, Noah said. Arden does not need the $5 million. She has done very well for herself. This is a message. Honor the original deal, or lose everything. What is the original deal, I asked. Integrity, Noah said. A leadership structure that is actually functional. Arden Rowe will not finance a monarchy. Ms. Carter, especially one ruled by a king who doesn't know how to read a balance sheet. He slid a card across the table. If you want to fix this, you need to find out what else your father and brother have been hiding. The withdrawal is just the first domino. I took the card. Why are you telling me this? Why not just let us default? Because Arden remembers you. Noah said. She remembers a little girl who used to sit in the corner of the office and color-code the filing cabinets. She thinks you might be the only Carter worth saving. I drove back to Briar Glen with my mind racing. The road was a gray ribbon under the overcast sky. Noah hadn't given me the solution, but he had given me the map. Integrity, hidden things. I went straight to the company archives. They were located in the basement of the administration building, a windowless room filled with metal shelving units that smelled of damp paper. I didn't look for the Rowe contract. I knew that was gone. I looked for the board minutes. Carter and Vail was a private company, but they still held quarterly board meetings. My father, the lawyers, and usually the CFO. I pulled the binders for the last 10 years. I started flipping through them. It was boring reading. approval of dividends, purchase of new trucks, health insurance renewals. Then I noticed the gaps. Quarter 3, 4 years ago, missing. Quarter 1, 2 years ago, missing. I looked closer at the pages that were there. The signatures were inconsistent. Sometimes my father's signature was shaky. Sometimes it was firm. Sometimes Ethan's signature was there as a witness. Sometimes it wasn't. And then, in the minutes from 5 years ago, I found a single line item that made me pause. Motion to approve allocation of funds for Project Lantern. Motion carried. There was no description, no dollar amount listed in the minutes, just a reference to an attached schedule that wasn't there. I searched the index. Project Lantern appeared once, and then vanished. I pulled the financial ledgers for that same month. I scanned the lines: marketing, operations, payroll, maintenance. There. Consulting fees. Lantern, $50,000. Paid to a shell company with an address in Delaware. I traced it forward. Every quarter, a payment to Lantern. Sometimes $20,000, sometimes $80,000. Always just under the threshold that would require a full audit. It wasn't a project. It was a siphon. I needed to ask my father. I needed to look him in the eye. I left the office and drove to my childhood home. It was a sprawling Victorian house on the hill, the kind of house that looked perfect on a Christmas card and felt like a museum on the inside. Lila's car was in the driveway. I walked around to the back. I knew my father often sat on the back porch in the afternoons, but he wasn't there. Lila was in the backyard. She was standing by the stone fire pit, poking at a fire that was smoking heavily. She was wearing a cashmere sweater and gardening gloves. But she wasn't gardening. She was feeding papers into the flames. "Lila," I called out. She jumped, dropping the poker. She spun around, her face pale. "Audrey." "You startled me. What are you doing?" I asked, walking closer. The smell of burning paper was acrid. "Just cleaning up," she stammered. "Getting rid of old junk. Your father keeps so much trash." I looked at the fire. I could see the edges of documents curling into ash. I saw the Carter and Vale letterhead turning black. "You are burning company records?" I asked, my voice rising. "No, just old notes, just scribbles." Lila moved to block my view, but she was trembling. I stepped around her. I reached into the edge of the pit, ignoring the heat, and snatched a piece of paper that hadn't fully caught yet. It was singed at the edges. Lila grabbed my arm. "Audrey, don't, please." I pulled away and looked at the scrap. It was part of a ledger page. I could make out the date 10 years ago, and there, in my father's handwriting, was a note in the margin. Row, 500,000. Lantern. Keep separate. I looked at Lila. Her eyes were wide, filled with a terrified pleading. "Why are you burning this?" I asked. "Did Ethan tell you to—" "He said it would help," she whispered. "He said there were things that would just confuse people, that we needed a clean slate for the estate transfer. He is destroying evidence. Lila." I shouted, "Do you understand? We are in a legal crisis, and you are destroying evidence. I am protecting the family," she cried, tears spilling over. "That is all I have ever done. I am keeping us safe. You don't understand. Audrey, if the truth comes out—" "If what truth comes out?" She clamped her hand over her mouth, shaking her head. "I can't." I looked at the charred paper in my hand. I carefully folded it and put it in my pocket. "Stop burning things," I said, my voice cold. "If you burn one more piece of paper—" "Lila, I will call the police and report you for obstruction of justice. Do not test me." I turned and walked away, leaving her weeping by the fire. I didn't get far. As I walked to my car, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. Blocking me in, Ethan got out. He didn't look frantic like Lila. He looked composed, immaculate in his navy suit. He closed the door gently and walked toward me. Leaving so soon, he asked, "Move your car." "Ethan," I said. He stopped a few feet away, invading my personal space just enough to be uncomfortable. He looked over my shoulder at the backyard, where Lila was still standing by the fire pit. "I see you have been upsetting Lila," he said. "She is fragile. Audrey, you know that. She is burning documents." I said, "And I know you told her to." Ethan smiled. A tight, thin stretching of his lips. She is tidying up. Dad is a pack rat. We don't need 40 years of notes cluttering up the house. I know about Project Lantern, I said. The smile didn't waver, but his eyes went flat. Dead. Is that so? He said softly. I know you have been siphoning money. I said, I know about the payments, and I know Arden Rowe knows. Ethan took a step closer. He lowered his voice to a whisper, intimate and menacing. You think you are very smart, Audrey. You always have. Little Miss Perfect, sitting in the corner with her books. But you are forgetting something. What is that? You live in Briar Glen, or close enough. Your friends are here. Your reputation is here. I stared at him. Are you threatening me? I am educating you, he said. If you keep digging, if you keep stirring up trouble with the bank and the lawyers, I will make sure you are done. Done, I will paint you as the bitter, unstable sister who tried to sabotage the family legacy because she didn't get a payout. He said, I will tell the town that you are having a breakdown. I will tell your clients that you breached confidentiality. I will make sure that no one in this county ever hires you again. He leaned in, his cologne cloying and sweet. There will be no public yelling, Audrey, no scenes, just a quiet, collective understanding that you are persona non grata. You will be cut out, socially, professionally, totally. He pulled back and smiled again. Now, give me whatever you took from the fire. I looked at him. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew he could do it. I knew how this town worked. A whisper from the Carter family at the country club, a word to the Rotary, and doors would close. I would be invisible again. Worse than invisible, I would be a pariah. For a second, the old shame washed over me, the desire to fold, to apologize, to just be the good girl and go away. It was a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders. He is the golden child. You are the mistake. But then I looked at his eyes. There was nothing behind them, no love, no loyalty, just a vast, consuming need to control. And I realized something. He wasn't threatening me because he was strong. He was threatening me because he was terrified. His power didn't come from competence. It came from silence. It came from everyone, Dad, Lila, the employees, me agreeing to pretend he was capable. If I stopped pretending, his power would evaporate. I didn't reach into my pocket. I didn't give him the paper. I stepped around him. Move the car. Ethan? I said, or I will drive across the lawn. He hesitated. For a moment, I thought he might grab me. But Ethan Carter didn't do violence. Violence was messy. He stepped aside, his face twisting into a sneer. You are making a mistake, Audrey. You are going to lose everything. I got in my car, locked the doors, and reversed across the perfectly manicured grass, tearing 2 deep ruts in the turf as I swung around his SUV. I didn't look back. I met Mara back at the warehouse. It was dark now, the office illuminated only by the glow of monitors. She looked up as I walked in. You look like you have been in a fight. I have been in a war, I said. I sat down and pulled the singed paper from my pocket. I smoothed it out on the table. We have a plan, Mara asked. We have a direction, I said. I pointed to the whiteboard where Mara had listed our liabilities. First, we stabilize payroll. I said, we go to the local credit union, not Pinecrest. We get a short-term line of credit against the unencumbered fleet vehicles. It won't be much, but it will buy us 2 weeks. And then Mara asked, then we stop negotiating with Ethan. I said, I looked at the name Rowe on the burnt paper. We find out what Project Lantern is. I said, because that is the leverage. Arden Rowe isn't pulling out because of the estate announcement alone. She is pulling out because she knows Ethan is using the company as a piggy bank. I looked at Mara. The withdrawal is a pressure campaign. Mara, she wants us to find the rot. She is forcing us to do the housekeeping my father was too cowardly to do. Mara nodded slowly. If we can prove the misuse of funds, we can force a governance review. Exactly, I said. I looked out the window at the dark warehouse floor. Ethan threatened to destroy me today, I said quietly. He thinks he can silence me. Mara looked at me, her expression serious. Can he? I touched the brass key in my pocket. No, I said, he can't, because I don't want the estate. I don't want the glory. I just want the truth. And the truth is the one thing Ethan Carter can't afford. The next morning, the silence in my apartment was heavy, the kind that rings in your ears. I drank my coffee standing up, watching the gray light of dawn filter through the blinds. I had the brass key in my pocket, and I had the charred scrap of paper with the number 5,100,000 on it. I needed context. The numbers were facts, but facts without history were useless. I drove back to Harborlight Savings. Sarah, the teller from high school, looked surprised to see me 2 days in a row. The bank was quiet, the air conditioning humming a low, monotone note. I need the access logs. Sarah, I said, keeping my voice low. For box 402, I need to know who accessed it before me. Sarah hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Audrey, you know the privacy rules. I am the executor of the key. Sarah, I said, and my father is not well. If there is something in that box that I missed, I need to know. She looked at me, searching my face. We had shared a locker bay in 10th grade. She knew I wasn't a drama queen. She typed a few commands and turned the screen slightly so I could see. It has not been accessed much, Sarah said. You opened it yesterday. Before that, Graham was here 5 years ago. September, 5 years ago. That matched the start of the Project Lantern payments I had found in the ledgers. Do you remember that visit, I asked? Sarah frowned. Thinking back, actually, I do. It was unusual. Graham usually came in joking, handing out lollipops to the tellers. That day, he looked terrible. Terrible how shaken, Sarah said, red-faced. He asked to see the box immediately, and she lowered her voice, glancing at the manager's office. He had just come from the parking lot. I saw him through the window. He was arguing with someone, who I couldn't see the other person. Sarah said, they were in a dark sedan. But Graham was yelling. I have never seen your father yell. Audrey. He was pounding on the roof of the car. Then the car drove off, and he came in here, looking like he had seen a ghost. He stayed in the vault for an hour. I thanked her and walked out. 5 years ago, my father had a roadside screaming match and then hid something in the box. A letter, a confession. I needed to talk to the other side of the equation. I called Noah Klein. He agreed to meet me, but not at a coffee shop this time. He gave me an address for a small park near the marina. When I arrived, he was sitting on a bench, watching the seagulls fight over a crab shell. Mr. Klein, I said, sitting on the opposite end of the bench. Miss Carter, I found something. I said, my father was paying a shell company called Project Lantern. The payment started 5 years ago. The same time he had a public meltdown in the bank parking lot. Noah nodded, his expression unreadable. You are digging in the right places. Does Arden Rowe know about Lantern, I asked. Arden knows that money was moving. Noah said, she didn't know the name of the shell company, but she knew the capital was being diverted. That is why she started watching closer. Why didn't she stop it then? Because the payments weren't illegal. Noah said, they were authorized by the majority shareholder. Your father can spend his profit how he likes. But it confirmed Arden's suspicion, which is that the company is being held hostage by a ghost. Noah said. I looked at him. Stop speaking in riddles. You said the original deal was about a broken promise. What promise? Noah turned to me. The wind ruffled his hair. He looked tired. Arden put up the money 30 years ago to save the company, he said. But the deal was that the money was a moral anchor. Graham promised that he would never use the business to cover up personal failures again. He promised that the company would stand for competence, not cronyism, and the withdrawal, Arden believes the money she invested is being used to mask a mess. Noah said, a personal mess. She believes your father and brother are paying someone off, and she is not in the business of financing hush money. Is that what Lantern is? I asked. Hush money. That is for you to find out. Noah said, but I will tell you this. Arden does not want to bankrupt the company. She wants to clean it. She wants the rot cut out. And if I can't find the rot, then the withdrawal stands, Noah said, and the bank takes everything. I drove back to the warehouse, the word rot echoing in my mind. Mara was waiting for me in the glass office. She had a new chart on the wall. It was colored in angry shades of red and black. How bad, I asked. Fatal, Mara said. She tapped a document on her desk. I just got off the phone with our relationship manager at Pinecrest. He was surprisingly candid. And they are already packaging our debt, she said. If we default on the covenant, which will happen in 28 days if the capital isn't replaced, they are going to sell our loan. To who? Northstone Distribution Group, Mara said. The air left the room. Northstone wasn't a competitor. They were an executioner. They were a massive conglomerate known for buying regional logistics companies, stripping the assets, firing the local staff, and keeping only the customer lists. If Northstone bought us, the Briar Glen warehouse would be a condo development within 2 years. They can't do that. I said, we have been with Pinecrest for 40 years. Banks don't have friends. Audrey, Mara said, they have risk models. And right now, we are radioactive. Northstone has been sniffing around for months. Ethan apparently had lunch with their VP of Acquisitions last quarter. I stared at her. Ethan met with them. Mara nodded. I found the expense report. He categorized it as strategic partnership exploration. My stomach turned. Ethan wasn't just incompetent. He was hedging his bets. If the company went under, he probably had a golden parachute negotiated with Northstone, a consulting gig to help them transition the clients. He would sell out the employees to save his country club membership. We have to tell the staff. I said, Ethan won't like that. Mara said, I don't work for Ethan. I said, and neither do you. I walked out of the office and hit the fire alarm button. The klaxon wailed, a sharp, rhythmic shriek that cut through the noise of the machinery. Conveyor belts stopped, forklifts powered down. Men and women in high-visibility vests looked around, confused. It wasn't a fire. It was a summon. I walked out onto the metal gantry that overlooked the warehouse floor. Mara stood beside me. Slowly, the staff gathered below. There were nearly 200 of them on shift. I recognized faces I had known since I was a child. Someone cut the alarm. The silence that followed was heavy. Ethan wasn't there. He was probably at the club, or meeting with his lawyers. I gripped the railing. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. My name is Audrey Carter. I said. My voice echoed in the vast space. Most of you know me. I grew up in these aisles. I saw nods, skeptical, but listening. There are rumors going around. I said, about the company's finances, about the future. I am not here to give you a corporate speech. I am here to tell you the truth. I took a breath. We are in a difficult position. I said, a major investor has withdrawn funding. The bank is nervous. There is a risk that the company could be sold. A murmur went through the crowd. I saw fear in their eyes. Real fear. The kind that comes from knowing the mortgage is due on the 1st, but, I continued, raising my voice, we are fighting it. Mara Vance and I are working every hour to secure new funding. We are renegotiating with vendors. We are cutting waste. I looked directly at Mike. The shift foreman. I will not lie to you. I said, the next month will be hard. There will be no overtime. We might be late on a pay cycle. But I promise you this, I will not sell you out. I will not let this company be stripped for parts. I am staying right here until we fix this. Why should we trust you? A voice called out from the back. You're just another Carter, because I am the one standing here, I said, and because I know how to read the contracts. I am not asking for your loyalty. I am asking for your patience. Give me 30 days. I held the gaze of the room. It was uncomfortable. It was raw. Then, Mike nodded. Just one nod. All right, Audrey, he said, 30 days. The crowd dispersed, returning to their machines. It wasn't a victory, but it was a truce. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Ethan. What the hell did you do? He hissed. I have security calling me saying you staged a riot. I held an all-hands meeting. I said calmly, I told them the truth. Something you should have done a week ago. You are out of control, Ethan said. You are undermining my authority. You don't have any authority. Ethan, I said, you have a title and a bleeding balance sheet. We need to talk. He said, Dad is upset. He thinks we are falling apart. I have set up a meeting with a mediator. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. A mediator. Yes, to resolve the family governance issues. It is at Renfield Consulting. Be there. He hung up. I looked at the phone. A mediator. It sounded responsible. It sounded like something a mature executive would do. But I knew Ethan. I arrived at Renfield Consulting the next morning. It was a boutique firm in a polished office park. The conference room was serene, with a water feature bubbling in the corner. Ethan was there, looking solemn. Lila was there, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Graham was there, looking at the floor, and the mediator was Dr. Marcus Aris. I recognized him immediately. He wasn't just a consultant. He was the man who had been in the foursome with Ethan and my father at the member guest tournament for the last 10 years. I sat down. Audrey, Dr. Aris said, his voice dripping with professional concern. Thank you for joining us. The goal today is to lower the temperature. We want to discuss the transition of the estate in a way that feels safe for everyone. I opened my notebook. I didn't say anything. Ethan feels. Doctor, Aris continued, glancing at a file, that you are struggling with the changes, that perhaps you are acting out because you feel excluded from the legacy. I looked up. Acting out. You held an unauthorized meeting with the staff, Ethan said, looking sad. You harassed our stepmother. You are spiraling. Audrey, we are worried about you. I see? I said, Doctor. Aris leaned forward. Audrey, inheritance can be a trigger for unresolved childhood dynamics. It is common for siblings to feel competitive, but we need to separate your emotional reaction from the business reality. Ethan is the CEO. The transition is legal. Your interference is causing damage. He was good. He was framing my investigation as a mental health crisis. He was pathologizing my competence. I wrote down his words. Unresolved dynamics. Interference. Is there a question? I asked. We would like you to sign a code of conduct. Doctor, Aris said. He slid a document across the table. It effectively bars you from the company premises and forbids you from contacting vendors or lenders without Ethan's written permission. It is for your own well-being, to give you space to process. I looked at the document. It was a gag order dressed up as therapy. I looked at my father. Dad, is this what you want? Graham looked up. His eyes were miserable. I just want the fighting to stop. Audrey, Ethan says this will help. I looked at Ethan. He was trying to hide a smirk. I closed my notebook. Dr. Aris, I said, how is your handicap these days? Excuse me. Aris blinked. Your golf game, I said. I saw you at the club last month. You and Ethan. You were celebrating. I believe Ethan paid for the round and the dinner. That is irrelevant, Aris said, stiffening. Is it? I asked. I am a lawyer. Doctor. Aris, I know what a conflict of interest looks like. You are not a neutral mediator. You are a paid consultant for the CEO designate. You are a family friend. I stood up. I will not sign this. And if you attempt to use this meeting to declare me mentally unfit or unstable, I will file a complaint with the licensing board so fast your head will spin. I will subpoena your billing records. Dr. Aris, I will find out exactly how much Ethan is paying you to gaslight me. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. Sit down. Audrey, no. I said, I am done playing house. I looked at my father. Dad, I said, Ethan isn't protecting you. He is isolating you, and he is doing it because he is terrified of what I found. What did you find? Graham whispered. I didn't answer. I walked out. I didn't go home. I went straight to the offices of Hollis and Brine. I walked past the receptionist. I walked past the associate, Greg. I walked straight into the office of the managing partner, Samuel Hollis. He was on the phone. He looked up, startled. Audrey, what is the meaning of this? Hang up. Sam, I said. He hesitated, then put the phone down. You can't be back here. Ethan has given strict instructions. I just came from a mediation session. I said, with Marcus Aris. Sam grimaced. He knew Marcus. Ethan tried to force me to sign a document barring me from the company. I said, he used a conflicted mediator to try and frame me as unstable. That is constructive termination of a shareholder's rights. Sam, and since your firm drafted the document, I saw the footer, you are complicit. Sam paled. I didn't know about the mediator's relationship. You did, I said, or you should have. Now, here is what is going to happen. You are going to give me the full file on the Rowe partnership, the unredacted version. I can't, Sam said. Privilege. Ethan is acting against the interest of the corporation. I said, he is endangering the client, which is the company, not him personally to cover his own tracks. If the company fails because you withheld material information from a minority shareholder during a crisis, I will sue this firm for malpractice, and I will win. Sam stared at me. He saw the resolve in my face. He saw that the polite, quiet Audrey Carter had left the building. He sighed and typed a password into his computer. I will print it, he said, but if anyone asks, you found it on a desk. 10 minutes later, I was in my car with a thick stack of papers. I drove to a parking lot overlooking the lake and read. I found the partnership agreement. It was attached to a trust addendum I had never seen. Clause 14B. Succession review. In the event that Graham Carter seeks to transfer majority control or the entirety of the estate to a single beneficiary, said transfer must be preceded by an independent governance review conducted by a party mutually agreed upon by Carter and Rowe. Failure to conduct this review constitutes a breach of the moral covenant and entitles Rowe to immediate withdrawal of all principal. I sat back, the paper trembling in my hand. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't a mystery. It was right there in black and white. My father knew. He knew that by announcing Ethan as the sole heir without the review, he was pulling the trigger on the default. He had blown up his own company. Why I drove to my father's house? I didn't knock. I used my key. The house was quiet. Ethan and Lila were likely still at the office or the club. I found my father in his study. He was sitting in his leather chair, staring at the wall. He held a glass of scotch, but he wasn't drinking it. I placed the document on the desk in front of him. You knew, I said. Graham looked at the paper. He didn't feign ignorance. He just closed his eyes. Clause 14B. I said, you knew that if you gave it all to Ethan without the review, Arden would pull the money. You knew it would destroy the business. I thought she wouldn't do it. He whispered. I thought after all these years, she would let it slide. Why, I asked. Why take the risk? Why not just do the review? Because Ethan wouldn't pass, Graham shouted. The sound of his voice was shocking. He slammed the glass down, spilling amber liquid on the desk. Ethan wouldn't pass an independent review. Audrey Graham said, his voice cracking, he is lazy. He cuts corners. He is charming. Yes, but he doesn't know how to run the business. If we did the review, the report would say he is unfit. And then what? Then you don't give him the company, I said. And then he leaves me, Graham said. He was crying now, tears tracking through the roadmap of wrinkles on his face. He told me. Graham sobbed. He told me that if I didn't announce it, if I didn't give him the full estate, publicly and immediately he would walk away. He would take Lila's side in the arguments. He would cut me off from the grandkids. He said I owed him for staying in this town while you left. I stared at him. It was so pathetic, so human. He demanded the announcement as proof of loyalty. I said, yes, Graham whispered. He said, if you trust me, you don't need a review. He made it a test. If I asked for the review, I was betraying him. So you betrayed the company instead. I said, you betrayed the employees. You betrayed Arden Rowe. I was trying to keep the family together. He said, no, Dad. I said softly, you were trying to keep yourself comfortable. You were afraid of Ethan's temper. You were afraid of being alone. I walked to the window. Ethan knew about the clause too. Didn't he? I asked. I don't know, Graham said. I think he did. I said, I think he pushed you to break the contract because he thought he could bully Arden Rowe just like he bullies you. He thought if he created a crisis, he could force her to back down. I turned back to him. But Arden Rowe doesn't bluff. Graham put his head in his hands. What do we do? Audrey. You don't do anything. I said, you sit here and you drink your scotch. I have to clean this up. I left him there. The house felt like a mausoleum. I had the answer to why the money was gone. But I still didn't have the leverage to bring it back. Arden Rowe was watching. She had seen Graham fail the test. She had seen him choose his son's ego over the company's safety. Now she was testing me. She wanted to see if I would accept the erasure, if I would let Ethan win because it was easier. I drove back to the bank. It was closing time, but I knocked on the glass until Sarah let me in. I need the box again. I said, you were just here. She said, I missed something. I went back to the vault. I opened box 402. I took everything out, the locket, the old memo. And then I felt it, taped to the underside of the metal lid, a second envelope. It was smaller. The paper was fresh. I pulled it loose. It wasn't addressed to anyone. I opened it. Inside was a single index card. The handwriting was elegant, sharp, and feminine. It was not my father's writing. Seabourn Motel. Room 12. November 2nd, 8 o'clock p.m. November 2nd was 2 days away. I stared at the card. It wasn't a relic from the past. It was a summons from the present. My father hadn't put this here 5 years ago. He must have put it here recently. Or maybe someone else had access. I looked at the back of the card. There was one more line. Bring the key. I closed the box. My hands were steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard determination. Ethan had his mediator. He had his lawyers. He had the title. But I had an appointment. I walked out of the bank into the twilight. The wind was picking up, stripping the last of the leaves from the trees. The storm was coming. I was ready for it. The Seabourn Motel was a relic of the 1950s, a horseshoe of single-story units clinging to the edge of the coastal highway. The neon sign buzzed with a dying flicker, casting a sickly pink light onto the wet asphalt. It was November 2nd, 8 o'clock at night, and the rain was coming down in sheets. I parked my car in the shadows away from the office. I checked my pocket. I had the brass key. I had the index card. I walked to room 12. The curtains were drawn tight. I didn't knock. The note had felt like an instruction, not an invitation. I put my hand on the doorknob. It was unlocked. I stepped inside and closed the door quickly against the wind. The room smelled of lemon polish and old carpet, but it was immaculate. There was no luggage, no mess. Sitting in the single armchair by the window was a woman. She was not the villain I had constructed in my mind. I had pictured a corporate shark, someone with cold eyes and a colder heart. The woman in the chair looked like a retired professor or a librarian who ran a tight ship. She was in her late 50s, wearing a charcoal wool sweater and dark trousers. Her hair was silver, cut in a sharp, practical bob. She held a book in her lap, her finger marking the page. She looked up. Her eyes were dark and incredibly direct. "You are punctual," she said. "That is a Carter trait. One of the few good ones." I stood by the door, dripping water onto the mat. "You are Arden Rowe." "I am," she said. She closed the book and set it on the small table. "Sit down. Audrey, the bed is clean. I didn't rent the room to sleep." I remained standing. "My lawyer knows I'm here." "No, he doesn't." She said calmly, "Noah doesn't know about this meeting. If he did, he would be here with a recording device and a waiver. I wanted 10 minutes of plain truth. No billable hours." I walked further into the room and sat on the edge of the bed. It was firm, unyielding. "You have my attention," I said. "You have also frozen our credit lines and terrified 500 employees. Is that your version of plain truth?" Arden watched me. She didn't flinch at the accusation. "Graham used to speak like that," she said, before he learned how to lie to himself. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "I am not here to bankrupt the company. Audrey, I built that company. My father built the company, I said. Arden smiled. A thin, dry expression. Your father was a charming salesman with a Rolodex. I was the one who understood logistics. I wrote the code for the inventory system in 1982. I negotiated the first interstate contracts. We were partners. 50-50? Then why is your name not on the building, I asked. Because life gets messy, she said. In 1989, my husband left me. It was ugly. There were debts. There were accusations of impropriety that were entirely fabricated to discredit me in the divorce, in a town like Briar Glen. Perception is reality. I became a liability. She paused, looking out the window at the rain. Graham came to me. He said he would protect me. He said he would buy out my public shares to shield the company from the scandal, but that I would remain a silent partner. He promised that once the dust settled, he would bring me back in. He promised acknowledgement. But he didn't bring you back. I said, no. Arden said, he found that he liked being the sole genius. He liked the myth of the self-made man. So he erased me. He kept my capital. He kept my systems. And he paid me a dividend to stay dead. And you let him, I had a daughter to raise. She said, and the dividends were substantial. I made a calculation. I sold my pride to buy her security. But I made Graham sign the moral covenant. I told him I would stay dead as long as he ran the ship with honor. I looked at her. The anger in her voice was cold, settled, like stone. And now I asked, now he is handing the wheel to a child who thinks the ship drives itself. Arden said, Ethan is not just incompetent. Audrey, he is dangerous. He treats the business like an ATM. I will not let my life's work fund his vanity. So you pull the plug, I asked, my voice rising. You punish the warehouse workers because you have a grudge against my brother. I am not punishing them, Arden said. I am waking them up. You are threatening payroll, I snapped. These are real people. Arden, they have mortgages. If you cared about the company, you wouldn't risk its survival just to prove a point. Arden looked at me with uncomfortable realism. Leverage is the only language executives hear. Audrey, if I sent a polite letter asking for a meeting, Ethan would have shredded it. If I sued, he would have buried me in paperwork for 10 years. I had to find the one pressure point that would force a crisis. I chose the liquidity clause because it is the only thing that cannot be spun. Math doesn't lie. She stood up and walked to the small kitchenette, pouring a glass of water. I don't want to destroy Carter and Vale. She said, I want to save it from your brother. How, I asked. By changing the structure. She said. She turned to face me. I will reinstate the funds. I will call off the bank. I will stabilize the covenants. I waited. There was always a catch. On 2 conditions, she said. First, you secure an independent governance review, a real one, not one of Ethan's golf buddies. And second, we rewrite the trust. No family member can hold the CEO title without the approval of an independent trustee. You want to strip the family of control. I said, I want to strip the family of absolute power. She corrected. There is a difference. If Ethan is as good as he says he is, he can prove it to a trustee. If he is a fraud, the trustee removes him. That is fairness. She took a sip of water. And there is one more thing. She said. Me. I want you to run the transition. She said. You are the only one who bothered to find me. You are the only one who read the fine print. You have the temperament for the details. I want you to be the interim operating officer. I shook my head. I am not an executive. I am a compliance lawyer. That is exactly what this company needs right now. Arden said. Less charisma, more compliance. She reached into her bag and pulled out a document. It was a single page, a reinstatement letter, already signed. Take this to your interim CFO. She said, draft the proposal. Get your father to sign the new trust structure. If you do that, the money flows back in 24 hours. And if I can't get him to sign, I asked, then the bank sells the debt to Northstone, she said. And Carter and Vale becomes a parking lot. I took the paper. It felt heavy. Why trust me, I asked. I am a Carter too. Arden looked at me, and for a moment, Her face softened. "Because you are the one who opened the box," she said. "You are the one looking for the truth. Graham never looked for the truth. He only looked for the exit." I drove back to the warehouse in a daze. The rain had stopped, leaving the roads slick and black. Arden Rowe wasn't a monster. She was the architect of the house we were living in, and she was tired of watching us set fire to the curtains. Mara was asleep at her desk when I walked in. She jerked awake when the door closed. "Audrey." "What time is it?" "It is time to write a proposal," I said. I slammed the reinstatement letter on the desk. Mara picked it up, her eyes widening as she read the signature. "You got it," she whispered. "You actually got it. I got a conditional offer," I said. "We have work to do." We spent the next 6 hours drafting. We didn't have a legal team. We didn't have templates. We built the governance structure from the ground up. We created a role for a neutral trustee, someone with veto power over executive appointments. We drafted a succession plan that required quarterly performance reviews for any family member employed by the firm. We built a firewall between the family trust and the operating capital. It was a beautiful document. It was a cage designed to hold a predator like Ethan. By the time the sun came up, we had a finished proposal. "We can present this to the board today," Mara said, rubbing her eyes. "It satisfies the bank. It satisfies Rowe. It saves the company." I looked at the document. It was logical. It was fair. But I knew logic wasn't the currency of the Carter family. Emotion was. And Ethan was about to flood the market. The counterattack began before I even had a chance to shower. I stopped at the local bakery on my way home to get coffee. It was a place I went to every morning. The owner, Mrs. Gable, usually had a cinnamon twist ready for me. When I walked in, the conversation stopped. Mrs. Gable was behind the counter. She didn't smile. She looked past me, wiping down the espresso machine with aggressive strokes. "Good morning, Mrs. Gable," I said. She didn't answer. I walked to the counter. "Is everything okay? We don't want any trouble." "Audrey," she said, her voice tight. "Trouble Ethan was here earlier." She said, "He was picking up pastries for the office. He was talking to the mayor. And he said, 'You are working with the people trying to shut down the warehouse,'" she said. "He said you are colluding with a bitter outsider to steal the family legacy. He said you are suing your own father." I felt the blood drain from my face. Ethan wasn't just spinning the story. He was inverting it. He was painting himself as the defender of the town and me as the traitor at the gates. "That is not true. Mrs. Gable," I said, "I am trying to save the warehouse." She looked at me, and I saw the doubt. Ethan was the golden boy. He was the one who cut the ribbons. I was the one who moved away. "Maybe it is best if you get your coffee somewhere else today," she said. I walked out. The shame burned my cheeks. It was a small town shunning, subtle and devastating. When I got to my apartment, my phone was blowing up. Texts from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. "How could you do this to Uncle Graham? Why are you attacking the family then?" A voicemail from Lila. "Audrey, please," her voice sobbed through the speaker. "Please stop this. Ethan showed us the lawsuit you are planning. He says you are trying to declare Graham incompetent. It is killing him. Why do you hate us so much? Just sign the papers Ethan gave you. Please." I sat on my kitchen floor. I didn't have a lawsuit. I hadn't filed anything. Ethan was fabricating documents to show them. He was gaslighting the entire family to isolate me. He knew I was close. He knew I had found Arden. He was scorching the earth so I would have no safe place to stand. I felt the urge to scream, to drive to his house and scream the truth until my throat bled. But then I remembered Arden's voice. Leverage is the only language they hear. Screaming wasn't leverage. Screaming was what Ethan wanted. He wanted me to be the hysterical sister. He wanted the public breakdown. I stood up. I washed my face. I put on my best suit. I made my bed. I wasn't going to break. I was going to be boring. I was going to be relentless. I drove back to the office. I walked past the whispering receptionists. I walked past the managers who looked away. I went straight to the accounting archives. I had one more piece of the puzzle to find. Project Lantern. I knew it was the mechanism for the payments, but I needed to know what it was. I pulled the physical files for the years the payments were made. I cross-referenced the wire transfers with the general ledger. The money was coded as consulting, but consulting requires invoices. There were no invoices. However, there was a correspondence file. I found a memo from the previous CFO, Arthur Penhaligon. It was addressed to Graham, dated 5 years ago. Re-lantern allocation. Graham. Per your instruction, we have moved the funds to the reserve account. I have structured it as a deferred compensation plan to avoid tax scrutiny. This should cover the obligation you mentioned without alerting the board. I must note my objection to this irregularity, but I will execute as ordered. I looked at the amount. It matched the exact total of the dividends Arden Rowe would have received if she hadn't been erased. It wasn't a payoff. It was back pay. Graham had been paying her under the table, not because she blackmailed him, but because he felt guilty. He knew he had stolen her equity, so he was trying to pay off his conscience in installments. Project Lantern wasn't fraud in the traditional sense. It wasn't money stolen for yachts or cars. It was a shadow payroll system designed to keep the secret that Graham Carter wasn't the sole genius of the company. And then I saw the date of the last payment. It was 3 weeks ago, the day before Graham announced Ethan as the heir. I sat back. The timeline clicked into place with a terrifying precision. Ethan must have found out about Lantern 3 weeks ago. He must have seen the payment go out. He confronted Graham. He probably threatened to expose the embezzlement to the board unless Graham announced the succession immediately. But Ethan didn't stop there. He knew about the clause. He knew Arden would withdraw if the announcement was made. He wanted her to withdraw. If Arden withdrew, the company would go into crisis. The stock value, if it were public, or the valuation would tank. The family would panic. And in that panic, Ethan could force a sale to Northstone, cash out his consulting fee, and walk away rich, blaming the bitter silent partner for destroying the company. Or he could force the family to consolidate power under him to fight the siege. Either way, he won. The estate announcement wasn't a blunder, it was a demolition charge. Ethan had deliberately triggered the crisis to blow up the old guard Graham and Arden so he could rule over the rubble. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. My brother wasn't just a spoiled brat. He was an arsonist. I took the file. I walked to Mara's office. "We have the proposal," I asked. Mara nodded. "Printed and bound. We are going to present it," I said, "but not to the board." "To who?" "To the family," I said. "Tonight, in the boardroom." "But Ethan has banned you," Mara said. "Security has orders." I looked at her. "I am a shareholder." "Mara, and I have the brass key." "What does the key do?" she asked. I smiled grimly. "It opens the one door Ethan forgot to lock." I spent the afternoon making calls, not to family, to the bank. I called Derek Halden, the relationship manager at Pinecrest. He didn't want to talk to me. "Mr. Halden," I said, "I am sending you a document signed by Arden Rowe. It guarantees reinstatement of the collateral if a specific governance structure is adopted." I heard him typing. "I see it," he said, his voice changing. This changes the risk profile significantly." "Good," I said. "I need you to do something for me. I need you to send a formal notice to Graham Carter. Tell him that the bank will accept this cure, but only if the agreement is signed within 48 hours. "That is unusual," Halden said. "We usually communicate through the CFO. Do you want your loan performing or not?" I asked. "I will send the notice." He said, "Step 1 complete." The bank was now applying pressure on my timeline, not Ethan's. Step 2 was the family. I sent a text to Lila. "I have a way to save Graham's reputation. I found the Lantern files. I know he wasn't stealing. I can prove it. Meet me at the office at 7 p.m. Bring Dad. I didn't invite Ethan. I knew he would come anyway. At 7 o'clock. The boardroom was dim. I had set the table. Copies of the governance proposal were at every seat. The Lantern file was in the center. The door opened. Lila came in first, guiding Graham. My father looked frail, his movements shuffling. He looked at me with a mix of fear and hope. Ethan came in last. He shut the door and leaned against it. He wasn't smiling. "This is a violation of the restraining order I drafted," Ethan said. "It's a code of conduct, not a court order." "Ethan," I said, "sit down." He didn't move. "You are trespassing." I picked up the lantern file. "I know what this is." "Dad," I said, looking at Graham, "I know you weren't stealing money. You were paying Arden what you owed her. You were trying to fix the past." Graham made a small, choked sound. "You know I know," I said, "and I know Ethan used this to blackmail you into the announcement." Ethan laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "That is a fantasy. Audrey, Dad announced it because he trusts me. He announced it because you threatened to ruin his reputation." I said, "You saw the payments. You told him you would frame it as embezzlement if he didn't hand you the crown." I looked at Lila. Ethan triggered this crisis on purpose. Lila. He knew the announcement would make Arden pull the money. He wanted the chaos. Why, Lila whispered, looking at Ethan, why would he do that? So he could sell to Northstone. I said. The room went silent. Ethan pushed off the door. "That is a lie." "Is it?" I asked. "I have the bank records. You met with Northstone 3 times last month. You have a term sheet. Don't you? A quick sale, a liquidation. You walk away with a finder's fee, and the employees get fired." Ethan walked to the table. His face was red. "You have no proof." I pointed to the proposal. "This is the proof." I said, "Arden Rowe has agreed to put the money back. All $5 million. Tonight." Graham looked up. "She will," "Yes," I said, "but only if we sign this." I slid the proposal toward him. "It creates an independent trustee. It stops the sale to Northstone. It protects the employees. And it keeps the company in the family." Graham reached for the document. His hand was shaking. "Don't sign that." "Dad," Ethan said. His voice was dangerous. "Why not?" Graham asked. "It saves us. Because it sidelines me." Ethan shouted. He lost control. The mask shattered. "It puts a babysitter over me. I am the CEO. I don't answer to a trustee." "You do if you want the money," I said. Ethan lunged for the paper, snatching it from under Graham's hand. "We don't need her money," he yelled. "We can find other lenders. We can sell the assets. We are not taking orders from that woman." He crumpled the proposal and threw it on the floor. Lila gasped. Graham shrank back in his chair. I didn't move. I didn't shout. I just watched him. "You just proved my point." "Ethan," I said quietly, "you would rather burn the company than share control." Ethan was breathing hard, his chest heaving. He looked at the 3 of us. He saw the fear in his father's eyes. He saw the confusion in Lila's. And he saw the absolute lack of fear in mine. "Get out," he hissed at me. I stood up. I picked up the crumpled ball of paper. I smoothed it out on the table. "The bank has given us 48 hours, I said. "If this isn't signed, they foreclose, and everyone will know it was you who let it happen. Not Arden, not me. You." I looked at my father. "It is your choice. Dad, you can be the man who built this company, or the man who let his son sell it for scrap." I walked to the door. "I will be at the warehouse," I said. "Let me know when you are ready to be honest." I walked out. My legs were shaking, but my head was clear. I had forced the reckoning. Now, we just had to survive the fallout. The boardroom smelled of lemon polish and nervous sweat. It was 10 o'clock in the morning, 12 hours after I had walked out on my family, leaving them with the ultimatum. I sat at the far end of the mahogany table. Mara Vance sat to my right, her laptop open, her face set in a grim line of determination. Across from us sat my father, Graham, and my stepmother, Lila. They looked like 2 people waiting for a hurricane to make landfall. And then there was Ethan. He walked in 5 minutes late, wearing a suit that cost more than the average annual salary of our warehouse workers. He carried a leather folio. He didn't look like a man who had been screaming the night before. He looked refreshed. He looked like the CEO he pretended to be. "Good morning," he said, placing the folio on the table. He offered a tight, dazzling smile to the room. I trust everyone slept well. I watched him. The charm was back. Lacquered over the panic, That was dangerous. Ethan was always most destructive when he was smiling. "We are here to discuss the governance proposal," I said, keeping my voice flat. "The bank needs a decision by close of business tomorrow." Ethan nodded. He sat down and opened his folio. "I have read it," he said. He slid a stack of crisp, stapled documents across the table. "And I agree." I blinked. "Excuse me, I agree." Ethan repeated. He looked at Graham. "You were right. Dad, we need to secure the capital. If Arden Rowe wants a trustee, she can have a trustee. If she wants a governance review, fine. I have nothing to hide." Graham let out a long, shuddering breath. "Thank God. Ethan, I knew you would do the right thing." Lila reached out and squeezed Ethan's hand. "Thank you. Honey, thank you for protecting us." Ethan bathed in their gratitude for a moment, looking magnanimous. I took the liberty of having my personal counsel retype the agreement. Ethan said, "Just to clean up the formatting, it is substantively identical to what Audrey and Mara drafted. We can sign it right now and send it to Pinecrest." He uncapped a fountain pen and held it out to Graham. "Sign it. Dad, let's save the company." Graham reached for the pen. "Stop," I said. The room froze. Graham's hand hovered in the air. "Audrey, don't start," Lila pleaded. He agreed. "He is doing what you wanted. I haven't read it." I said. Ethan rolled his eyes. "It is the same document. Audrey, I just fixed the margins." "You are being obstructionist. If it is the same document, then you won't mind if I read it before Dad signs." I said. I reached over and took the document from in front of my father. Ethan's hand twitched, a microspasm of instinct, as if he wanted to snatch it back. I opened it. The first page looked standard. The definitions were correct. The preamble about the silent partner was there. I flipped to page 4. The section on the independent trustee. It looked right. The powers of veto were listed. The requirement for quarterly reviews was there. But then my eyes caught paragraph 12, section C. It was buried in the middle of a dense block of text about operational continuity. Notwithstanding the foregoing, the interim chief executive shall retain full and sole discretion over all asset dispositions, vendor contracts, and banking relationships under the value of $10 million, and such decisions shall not be subject to trustee review during the transition period. I stopped reading. The air in the room felt suddenly thin. Full discretion. Asset dispositions. That clause gave him the power to sell the warehouse equipment, the fleet, and the inventory to Northstone without the trustee even knowing until the checks cleared. He wasn't agreeing to supervision. He was carving out a loophole that rendered the supervision meaningless. I looked up. Ethan was watching me. His eyes were hard. Flat stones. "Is there a problem?" he asked innocently. I didn't answer him. I looked at my father. "Dad," I said, "do not sign this." "Why?" Graham asked, looking confused. I read the clause aloud. My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering. Retain full and sole discretion over all asset dispositions, and such decisions shall not be subject to trustee review. I slapped the paper onto the table. He added a loophole. "Dad, this clause allows him to sell the company piece by piece while the trustee is looking the other way. It allows him to liquidate the assets to Northstone before the governance review even starts." Graham looked at Ethan. "Is that true?" Ethan's face flushed. "It is standard operating language. Dad, you can't have a CEO running to a babysitter every time he wants to sell a used truck. I need agility. Audrey is being paranoid. $10 million is not a used truck." "Ethan," I snapped, $10 million is the entire fleet. You put this in here so you could gut the company behind our backs." "I didn't," Ethan shouted, the charm cracking. "I am trying to run a business. You are trying to strangle me with red tape. You are trying to steal the furniture while the house is on fire." I said, "I tore the document in half. We used the original draft." I said, "The one Mara and I wrote? No edits, no loopholes. Or I call the bank right now and tell them the deal is off." Ethan stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "You have no authority," he yelled. "I have the relationship with Arden Rowe," I said, "and right now, that is the only authority that matters." Ethan glared at me. For a second, I thought he might come across the table. Then he buttoned his jacket, smoothed his tie, and regained his composure. "Fine," he said, his voice dripping with ice. "Have it your way, but when this company fails because we couldn't move fast enough, it will be on your head." He turned and walked out of the boardroom. Graham sat with his head in his hands. Lila was staring at the torn paper on the table, looking like she was trying to read a foreign language. "He tried to trick me," Graham whispered. He looked at me, his eyes wet. He looked me in the eye and lied. "He did," I said gently. I signaled Mara. She pulled a fresh copy of the original proposal, our proposal, from her bag. "Sign this one." "Dad." Graham signed. His signature was shaky, a jagged scrawl of a man who had lost faith in his own legacy. We had the signature, but we still had to survive the bank. At 2:00, Mara and I drove to the headquarters of Pinecrest National. It was a glass tower in the city center, a monument to compound interest. We were ushered into a conference room on the 40th floor. The view was spectacular, looking out over the harbor, but the atmosphere inside was sterile. Derek Halden, our relationship manager, was waiting. He was a man in his late 40s with a tan that looked expensive and a watch that looked like it cost more than my car. "Miss Carter, Miss Vance," he said, not standing up. "Mr. Halden." I said. We sat. I slid the signed proposal across the polished granite table. Along with it, I placed the letter from Noah Klein. "We have met the conditions," I said. "The governance structure has been adopted. The silent partner, Arden Rowe, has agreed to reinstate the $5,100,000 immediately upon your acceptance of this cure." Halden picked up the letter. He read it slowly, his face expressionless. He didn't look relieved. He looked annoyed. "This is creative," he said, dropping the letter back onto the table. "But the bank has concerns about the viability of this trustee model. It introduces friction. We prefer clean lines of authority." "We have clean lines," I said. "We have professionalized the oversight. This makes the company safer, not riskier." Halden leaned back, steeping his fingers. "Frankly, Ms. Carter, Pinecrest is reviewing its exposure in the logistics sector. Given the recent instability in your leadership and the unauthorized withdrawal, we feel the risk profile has shifted permanently." He paused, then delivered the blow. "We believe a strategic acquisition might be the best path forward. Northstone Distribution has expressed a strong interest in acquiring the debt. They would pay off the loan in full. It would be a clean exit for your family." He was pushing the sale. He wasn't acting as a lender. He was acting as a broker. "Mr. Halden," I said, leaning forward, "Northstone will liquidate the local operations. That kills 500 jobs in this region. Pinecrest prides itself on being a community bank. Are you telling me you want to be responsible for gutting the local economy? I am responsible to my shareholders," Halden said coldly. "Northstone is a AAA-rated entity. Carter and Vale is currently in technical default. We are only in default because of a trigger event that is now resolved." I said, "If you refuse to accept the reinstatement of funds, you are acting in bad faith. You are manufacturing a default to force a sale." Halden's eyes narrowed. "Be careful, Ms. Carter." "I am being careful." I said, "I am also being a lawyer. If Pinecrest rejects a full cure of the default in favor of a predatory sale, I will file an injunction. I will tie this loan up in court for 2 years. You won't get a clean exit. You will get a litigation nightmare." I stood up. "You have the signed agreement. You have the commitment letter from Rowe. You have until tomorrow at 5:00 to accept it." We walked out. In the elevator, Mara slumped against the wall. "He is going to sell us," she said. "He didn't care about the letter. He wants the Northstone deal." Why, I asked. "Because bankers get deal fees," she said. "If he manages the sale to Northstone, he probably gets a bonus. If he just renews our loan, he gets nothing. We need to stop him." I said, "How we need to prove he is colluding with Ethan." I said. We went back to the warehouse. The mood was grim. The 30-day clock I had promised the employees was ticking, but the bank was moving faster. I went to my temporary desk and opened my laptop. I started digging through the company email server. I had administrative access now. Thanks to the authority Graham had signed over, I wasn't looking for financial records this time. I was looking for communication. Suddenly, Mara called out from the glass office. "Audrey, come here." I ran in. Mara was staring at her screen, her mouth open. "Look at this," she said. She pointed to a calendar entry. It was an Outlook invite. It was titled, "Lunch, Strategy Session." The date was today. The time was 12:30. The attendees were Derek Halden, Ethan Carter, and Marcus Stone Northstone VP. "How do you have this?" I asked. Ethan forwarded it to his assistant to book the table. Mara said, but he accidentally hit reply all to a previous thread that included the finance distribution list. He recalled it 10 seconds later, but my archive caught it. I looked at the screen. Ethan was having lunch with the banker and the acquirer right now. While I was in Halden's office fighting for the company, Ethan was sitting with him, negotiating the surrender. He is cutting a side deal. I said, I looked closer at the location, the chop house. I pulled out my phone. "What are you doing?" Mara asked. "Are you going there?" "No," I said. "If I go there, I am just the hysterical sister crashing a business lunch. They will laugh me out of the room." I dialed a number. "Who are you calling, Pinecrest National?" I said, "But not the lending desk." A voice answered, "Pinecrest National, Ethics and Compliance Hotline. This is Audrey Carter." I said, "I am a shareholder of Carter and Vale Industrial Supply. I would like to report a conflict of interest regarding your officer, Mr. Derek Halden." I spent the next 20 minutes explaining the situation. I told them about the scheduled covenant review. I told them about the offer to cure the default. And then I told them that their loan officer was currently dining with the borrower's CEO and a third-party acquirer to discuss a sale that would likely generate a personal commission, all while refusing a full repayment of the loan. "I have the calendar invite." I said, "I can email it to you right now." The compliance officer sounded very interested. "Send it," she said. I hung up. "What happens now?" Mara asked. "Now we wait." I said, "Compliance departments hate risk. Halden playing broker on a distressed loan is a massive liability. If they think he is rigging the outcome, they will pull him off the file." It was a quiet move, a boring move, but it was the only move that worked in the real world. I needed fresh air. I walked out to the parking lot. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the asphalt. I saw Lila's car parked near the back. She was sitting in the driver's seat, just staring at the steering wheel. I walked over and tapped on the glass. She jumped, then rolled down the window. Her eyes were red and puffy. "Audrey," she said, "why are you sitting here?" "Lila," I asked, "I don't know where to go." She said, "Graham is at home, crying. Ethan is, I don't know where Ethan is, and I'm afraid to go home." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that we have lost everything." She said. I leaned against the car door. "Lila," I said, "why did you repeat that phrase, 'keep us safe'? Why were you so terrified of Arden Rowe?" Lila looked down at her hands. "Ethan told me stories," she whispered. "He told me that Arden was a vindictive woman who hated Graham. He said that if she ever got a foothold back in the company, she would sue us personally. He said she would take the house. He said she would take the pension." She looked at me, her face crumbling. He said the only way to stop her was to give him total control. He said he was the only one strong enough to fight her. I felt a wave of pity. Lila wasn't evil. She was just a woman who had married into a family she didn't understand, and she had been weaponized by a sociopath. "Ethan lied to you, Lila." I said, "Arden doesn't want the house. She has plenty of money. She just wanted the company run properly. Ethan used your fear to get you to support him." Lila wiped her eyes. "He seemed so sure." "Audrey, he is always so sure. That is his talent." I said, "He makes you believe that his way is the only way, but right now, his way is to sell the company and leave the employees with nothing." "Is he really doing that?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "He is trying to sell it right now." Lila gripped the steering wheel. Graham would die if the company was sold. It is his whole life. Then stop supporting Ethan. I said, stop protecting him. Lila nodded slowly. I will try. I drove to my father's house. I needed to hear it from him. I needed to understand the root of this rot. Graham was in the study. The bottle of scotch was gone. He was drinking tea. He looked smaller, deflated, like a balloon that had lost its helium. Dad, I said, sitting in the leather chair opposite him. Audrey, he said. We sat in silence for a moment. The grandfather clock ticked in the hall. Why, I asked. He didn't ask what I meant. He knew. Why, Ethan, I asked. Why did you let him take over when you knew he wasn't ready? Why did you pay him off? Why did you sacrifice me? Graham looked at the window. It was dark outside. You were always strong. Audrey, he said softly, even when you were little. You fell off your bike. You got up. You failed a test. You studied harder. You didn't need me. And Ethan needs to be the center of gravity. Graham said, if he isn't the most important person in the room, he breaks things. He breaks relationships. He breaks peace. Graham turned to look at me. It was fear. Audrey, it wasn't love. It was management. I spent my whole life managing his anger. If I gave him what he wanted, the house was quiet. If I said no, it was war. So you gave him the company to keep him quiet, I asked, feeling a cold fury rising in my chest. I thought I could control it. Graham said, I thought if I gave him the title, he would rise to the occasion. I thought the responsibility would fix him. Responsibility doesn't fix people. Dad, I said, it reveals them. Graham nodded. I know that now. He leaned forward. I punished you because you wouldn't play the game. He said, you wouldn't flatter him. You wouldn't back down. You made it hard to keep the peace because you insisted on the truth, and the truth was the one thing I couldn't afford. I looked at him, a weak man, a man who had built a business empire but couldn't run a dinner table. I am not playing the game anymore. Dad, I said, I am not looking for revenge. I don't want to hurt him, but I am going to put up walls. Walls, legal guardrails. I said, the trustee, the covenants. I am going to build a cage that prevents any one person, Ethan, or you, or me from holding this company hostage again. That is the only way this survives. Graham looked at me with a strange expression. Pride, regret. You sound like Arden, he said. I stood up. Maybe one of us should. I said, I returned to my apartment late. I was exhausted. My bones ached. I checked my email one last time before bed. There was a new message. It was from an anonymous sender. Proton mail. Untraceable. Subject, you missed one. I opened it. There was an attachment. A scanned PDF. It was a legal document. A codicil to a last will and testament. I, Graham Carter, being of sound mind, hereby amend my will to irrevocably transfer the voting rights of the Carter Trust to Ethan Carter. Effective immediately upon any challenge to his authority as CEO. The date on the signature was 2 days ago. I stared at the screen. If this was real, then everything I had done was pointless. If Graham had signed this perhaps in a moment of weakness, or perhaps under duress from Ethan, then Ethan already had the voting rights. He could fire the board. He could fire me. He could veto the trustee. But if it was a fake, if it was a trap designed to make me panic, if I brought this to court, I would be challenging his authority, which would trigger the very clause the document described. It was a paradox, a legal landmine. I looked at the signature. It looked like Graham's. But Graham had signed a lot of things lately with shaking hands. I picked up my phone to call Mara, then stopped. If I reacted, Ethan won. If I showed fear, he won. I had to verify it. But I couldn't ask Graham. He wouldn't remember. Or he would lie to protect the peace. I had to go into the bank review tomorrow blind, knowing that at any moment, Ethan could pull this document out and end the game. I closed the laptop. I walked to the window and looked out at the lights of Briar Glen. Ethan had one more lever. He had hinted at it. This was it. He was betting that I would fold. He was betting that I would see this document and retreat to save what little dignity I had left. He was wrong. I wasn't going to retreat. I was going to call the bluff. And if it wasn't a bluff, then I would go down fighting. I turned off the light. The darkness of the room felt absolute. Tomorrow was the bank review. Tomorrow was the end of the line. The conference room at Pinecrest National was located on the 42nd floor, high enough that the city of Briar Glen looked like a model train set below us. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that felt designed to preserve dead bodies. I sat on one side of the slate-gray table. Mara Vance sat next to me. In front of us were 3 neatly bound documents, the reinstatement letter from Arden Rowe, the new governance plan establishing an independent trustee, and a retention strategy for the key warehouse staff. Opposite us sat Derek Halden. He looked worse than he had the day before. His tan seemed sallow under the fluorescent lights, and there was a sheen of sweat on his upper lip. He kept checking his watch. "Where is the CEO?" Halden asked, tapping his pen against a leather notebook. "We are 10 minutes past the hour." "He is coming," I said. "Traffic on the bridge." "He is stalling," Mara muttered under her breath. The door swung open. Ethan walked in. He wasn't rushing. He held a coffee cup from a boutique roaster in one hand and his phone in the other. He didn't apologize. He didn't look at me or Mara. He walked to the head of the table, the seat technically reserved for the chairman, and sat down. "Let us begin," Ethan said, offering Halden a bright, unbothered smile. "I assume we are here to discuss the extension of the credit line." "We are here to discuss the default," Halden said sharply. "The bank is not comfortable with the current exposure." "Ethan, the withdrawal of the silent partner has triggered a liquidity crisis that your current cash flow cannot cover." I leaned forward. "We have a cure for the default." "Mr. Halden." I slid the reinstatement letter across the table. "Arden Rowe has committed to returning the full principal of $5,100,000. I said, "The funds are in escrow, ready to be released immediately." Halden didn't pick up the letter. He stared at it as if it were contaminated. "We have reviewed the proposal." Halden said, "The bank finds the conditions cumbersome. A trustee structure introduces operational lag. In a volatile market, we need leadership that can act decisively." He opened a folder in front of him. "Northstone Distribution Group has made a formal offer to acquire the debt." Halden said, "They are willing to pay 100 cents on the dollar. It clears the books, it protects the bank, and it gives the Carter family a graceful exit." "It is not a graceful exit," I said. "It is a liquidation." I opened my own folder. "Mr. Halden," I said, "I have done a vendor analysis. Carter and Vale is not just a warehouse. We are the primary logistics hub for 3 regional hospital networks and the school district. Our trucking routes are integrated with your other commercial clients." I pointed to a graph Mara had prepared. "If Northstone buys us, they consolidate. They move the inventory to their mega hub in Ohio. That means the local delivery network collapses. Your other clients, the hospitals. The manufacturers will face a 30% increase in shipping costs. They will default on their own loans with this bank." I looked him in the eye. "You are trying to save one loan by blowing up the local ecosystem." I said, "That is bad banking. And frankly, given that the compliance department is currently reviewing your calendar, I would think you would want to avoid any decisions that look like they favor a specific buyer." Halden stiffened. His eyes darted to Ethan, then back to me. He knew I had reported him. He knew the walls were closing in. Ethan laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "Audrey is being dramatic." "Derek," Ethan said, "Northstone is a fantastic partner. And frankly, I am tired of begging for money from a silent partner who holds a grudge. I think the sale is the smartest play. You are the CEO." I said to Ethan, "You are supposed to fight for the company, not shop it around." "I am being a realist," Ethan snapped. Halden cleared his throat. He looked at the reinstatement letter, then at the Northstone offer. He was trapped, if he pushed the sale now, with a viable cure on the table and a compliance investigation looming. He would be exposing himself to a lawsuit he couldn't win. "The bank is willing to grant a conditional extension," Halden said, his voice tight. Ethan stopped smiling. "What conditions?" "We will accept the reinstatement of the Rowe capital." Halden said. But the governance structure must be legally binding. We need the new trust agreement signed by Graham Carter. He looked at his watch. You have 48 hours, Halden said. If we do not have the signed trust documents and the proof of funds by 5 o'clock on Friday, we will exercise our right to sell the debt to Northstone. He stood up. Good day. The drive back to the Carter estate was silent. Ethan drove his SUV. I followed in my sedan, with Mara in the passenger seat. He is going to break him, Mara said, watching Ethan's taillights. Ethan is going to use every trick in the book to stop Graham from signing. He can try, I said, but Graham is out of time. When we arrived, the house felt like a stage set for a tragedy. The curtains were drawn. Lila met us at the door, her face pale and drawn. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. He is in the library, she whispered. We walked in. Graham was sitting in his leather armchair, a blanket draped over his legs. He looked 20 years older than he had a month ago. The fight had drained him. Ethan was already pouring a drink at the sidebar. He didn't offer one to anyone else. So, Ethan said, taking a sip, the bank gave us a deadline. We have the papers. Dad, I said, I placed the trust documents on the desk. All you have to do is sign. We send it to Noah Klein. Arden releases the money, and we are safe. Safe, Ethan scoffed. He walked over and stood behind Graham's chair, placing a hand on our father's shoulder. It was a gesture of dominance, not comfort. Do you know what this document does, Dad? Ethan asked softly. It declares you incompetent. It says you can't be trusted to choose your own heir. It puts a stranger in charge of your legacy. It puts a trustee in charge of compliance. I said, it protects the company from reckless decisions. Reckless Ethan tightened his grip on Graham's shoulder. I have been running this company for 5 years while you were out playing compliance officer in the suburbs. Audrey, I am the one who stayed. I am the one who had dinner with him every Sunday. He looked down at Graham. Dad, look at me. Graham looked up, his eyes watery and fearful. I am your son, Ethan said. I am the one who carries the name. If you sign this, you are telling the world that you chose her over me. You are telling them that the prodigal daughter who left is worth more than the son who stayed loyal. It is not about affection, Ethan, Graham whispered. It is about the bank. It is about respect, Ethan shouted, the sudden noise making Graham flinch. I have sacrificed everything for this family. I could have gone to Wall Street. I could have left this town. I stayed for you. And now you want to handcuff me? He leaned down, his face inches from his father's. If you sign that paper, Dad, I am done. I will walk out that door and I will never come back. You won't see me at Christmas. You won't see the grandkids when I have them. You will die alone in this big house with nothing but your money and your daughter who judges you. Lila let out a sob from the corner. Ethan, please, don't say that. I am serious, Ethan said, keeping his eyes on Graham. Choose, right now, me or the trustee. Graham was trembling. He looked at the pen, then at Ethan. The threat of abandonment was the one thing he couldn't handle. It was the weapon Ethan had used since he was a teenager. Give me what I want, or I will withdraw my love. I can't, Graham whispered. I can't lose you. Ethan. He pushed the papers away. I watched them. I saw the dynamic that had rotted this family from the inside out. The hostage situation disguised as loyalty. I walked forward. Leave the room, I said. Ethan looked at me. Make me? I said leave the room. I repeated. I want 5 minutes with my father. If you are so confident in his loyalty, you have nothing to worry about, Ethan sneered. 5 minutes, then I'm shredding those papers. He walked out, taking his drink. Lila followed him, looking back at me with apologetic eyes. The door clicked shut. I was alone with Graham. The silence was heavy. I didn't sit down. I stood in front of the fireplace, looking at the man who had raised me. I am not going to beg you. Dad, I said. Graham looked at his hands. He won't come back. Audrey, he means it. He holds grudges forever. I know. I said, he is holding the family hostage. He has been doing it for 20 years. I walked over and sat on the ottoman in front of him. I am not going to threaten you. I said, I am not going to say I will leave if you don't sign. I will still come for Christmas. I will still call you on your birthday. Graham looked up, surprised. You will? Yes, I said, because I don't use love as a transaction. I took a breath. But I need you to understand what happens if you don't sign. The bank sells the company to Northstone. The warehouse closes. 500 people lose their jobs. The pension fund gets dissolved. The legacy you built becomes a parking lot. And Ethan Graham asked, Ethan will take a consulting fee and move to Florida. I said, he doesn't care about the warehouse, Dad. He cares about the payout. He is selling you out, and he is making you feel guilty for letting him do it. Graham closed his eyes. I am afraid of him. Audrey, I am afraid of the silence. I know. I said gently, it is terrifying to be cut off by someone you love. But look at what the fear has cost you. You lost Arden. You lost your integrity. You almost lost the business. I reached out and took his hand. It was cold and paper thin. You have to decide what kind of father you are. I said, are you the father who enables a bully to keep the peace? Or are you the father who protects the people who depend on him? I stood up. If you don't sign, I will walk away. Not because I hate you, but because I can't watch you destroy yourself. I will go back to my life. I will live without your approval. I have done it for years. I can do it forever. I left the papers on his lap. It is your choice. Dad, dignity, or fear. I turned and walked toward the door. I put my hand on the knob. Wait, Graham said. I stopped. He picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly the tip rattled against the paper. He held the pen with both hands to steady it. He is going to hate me, Graham whispered. He already hates himself. Dad, I said, you can't fix that. Graham took a deep breath. He pressed the pen to the paper. He signed the first page, then the second, then the third. He dropped the pen. It rolled onto the Persian rug. It is done, he said. I picked up the documents. The ink was wet. It looked like a surrender, but I knew it was a liberation. I opened the door. Ethan was leaning against the wall in the hallway. He straightened up when he saw the papers in my hand. He looked past me to Graham. Dad. Ethan said. Graham didn't look up. I signed it. Ethan, we have to save the company. Ethan's face went blank. The charm evaporated. The anger evaporated. What was left was a cold, reptilian calculation. You coerced him, Ethan said to me. I didn't coerce anyone. I said, I gave him a choice. You manipulated an elderly man under duress, Ethan said, his voice rising. This won't stand. I will challenge the signature. I will tie this up in probate court for 10 years. You can try. I said, but the bank has the papers. The trust is active. You are no longer the sole decision-maker. Ethan walked up to me. He was close enough that I could smell the scotch on his breath. You think you won, he whispered. You think because you have a piece of paper. You are in charge. I will bleed this company. Audrey, I will sue every vendor. I will file injunctions against every transfer. I will make the trustees' life a living hell until they quit. Go ahead, I said, but you will be doing it from the outside. I walked past him. I handed the papers to Mara, who was waiting in the foyer. Scan them, I said. Send them to Noah Klein. Tell him to release the funds. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Noah. The funds have been wired, he said. Pinecrest has acknowledged the receipt. The default is cured. I let out a breath. I felt like I had been holding for a month. We did it. Not quite, Noah said. Arden has a condition. I closed my eyes. Of course she does. She wants you to stay, Noah said. I can't stay. Noah, I have a job. I have a life 2 towns away. She is adamant. Noah said, she doesn't trust the trustee to understand the operations. She wants you to be the interim operating lead. She wants you to be the eyes and ears on the ground for the next 6 months. And if I refuse? She didn't say, Noah said, but she hinted that she might reconsider the duration of her investment. I looked around the warehouse office. The staff was working. The forklifts were moving. The lights were on. I couldn't walk away now. Not when the wolf was still circling the perimeter. "Tell her I accept," I said. The final confrontation happened in the parking lot at 5 o'clock. I was walking to my car. The sun was going down, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red. Ethan was waiting for me. He was leaning against my sedan, his arms crossed. He looked relaxed, smiling. "Even, get off my car." "Ethan," I said. He pushed off the hood. "You played a good game." "Audrey," he said, "I underestimated you. I didn't think you had the stomach for it." "I didn't play a game." I said, "I told the truth." He chuckled. "The truth. That is a quaint concept." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. He tossed them in the air and caught them. "You have the trust," he said. "You have the money. You have the title." "But," I asked, "but you forgot one thing." He said. He walked closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "The covenants with Pinecrest aren't just about liquidity. Audrey, they are about compliance, environmental compliance." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Do you remember the old storage tank behind the north loading dock?" Ethan asked. "The one we decommissioned 3 years ago?" "Yes," I said. "It was drained and sealed. I saw the report." "You saw the report I gave you," Ethan said, his smile widening. "But you didn't see the reality. I didn't drain it. Audrey, it was expensive to dispose of the chemicals properly, so I just capped it." My stomach dropped. "It has been leaking," he said cheerfully, "into the groundwater. Just a little bit, enough to trigger a Tier 1 environmental breach if anyone were to, say, test the soil." He leaned in. "Pinecrest has a zero-tolerance policy for environmental liability. If that breach is discovered, the loan is called immediately. No cure period, no negotiation. Immediate foreclosure." He stepped back. "I am the only one who knows exactly where the leak is," he said, "and I am the only one who knows how to fix it before the inspectors come." He opened his car door. "So, here is how this is going to work. You are going to run the company. You are going to deal with the headaches, but you are going to pay me. You are going to hire me as a special consultant for environmental remediation, and the fee is going to be very, very high." He got into his SUV. "If you fire me, or if you stop paying, I make an anonymous call to the EPA, and the whole thing burns down." He started the engine. "Welcome to the corner office, sister," he said. He drove away, leaving me standing in the cold, exhaust fumes swirling around my ankles. I stood there for a long time. I had the brass key. I had the trust. I had the company. But Ethan was right. The war wasn't over. He had planted mines in the foundation, and he was the only one with the map. I reached into my pocket and touched the key. He thought this was checkmate. He thought he had me trapped in a new blackmail loop. But he forgot one thing. I wasn't Graham. I didn't pay blackmail. I took out my phone and dialed a number. "Mara," I said. "Yeah. Get me the number for a private environmental assessment firm." I said. "From out of state." "What is wrong?" she asked. "We have a leak," I said, "and we are going to dig it up. Tonight, I said. I looked at the taillights of Ethan's SUV disappearing into the dark. He wanted to bleed the company. I was going to cauterize the wound, even if it hurt, even if it left a scar. I got into my car and turned the ignition. The engine roared to life. The story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about excavation. I put the car in gear. I was ready to dig. Thank you for listening to the story of Audrey Carter and the Battle for Carter Vale. It is a story about the quiet violence of family secrets and the courage it takes to break the cycle of silence. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. If you enjoyed this realistic take on family drama and corporate brinkmanship, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more narratives about justice, leverage, and the truth. I am also very curious to hear your thoughts on the ending. Do you think Audrey made the right choice by confronting Graham? And what would you do about Ethan's final threat regarding the environmental leak? Would you pay him off? Or risk everything to expose it? Share your theories in the comments in English. I read every single one. Thank you for your time.